morning. Oh, poop. Oh shit, did I turn this on? No. Oh, let's see. This is working. No, of course not. All right. Oh, yeah. Hey everybody. Hey Sally, welcome. Hi Mary from freezing Michigan. It is freezing here. I am so happy that I went hiking yesterday because I had to go out to the printer to get a few patterns to get in the mail, and I decided to go before now because the temperature is going to feel like single digits and the wind is absolutely ridiculous here. This is like the first, maybe second cold that we've had in Connecticut this winter. I mean, we've basically not had a winter, but it is freezing. So I'm glad I'm inside. And let's just say hi. Cor? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, from Minnesota. I'm actually going to be teaching a live event in Minnesota in August. I think it'll be a much nicer temperature there in August. Oh, it's cold for Judy too. Yeah, I think pretty much across the whole country we've gotten a little bit of a cold snap. 15 when you got up, Mary. That is freezing. Oh my goodness. Well, the ironic thing is I ordered a bunch of fabric. Oh wait, let me ask Sally. Sally, is it abnormally cold in Alaska? Or is it like normal? Jen has color on today. I do, Mary, and guess what? I am so excited because I don't know if you saw on my Instagram, I posted a picture, and I don't think I have it on my phone. But basically, the reason why I'm wearing this top today is because the first fabric I'm going to work with to create some Sorcha classic slim trousers for myself is a linen that I got from gorgeousfabric.com, and it's almost this color. So I purchased sort of a bright, it's called bittersweet, so it's sort of a color like this. I also picked a wine rayon twill from Fabric Mart and a nice tan cotton khaki from LA Finch Fabric. So I'll be showing you those as they come in. All right, let me get back to Sally here. It's not abnormally cold. We had a really warm January, but now it's back to snow. Yes, well that's nice. I'm glad it's snowing there. We've had a total of 2 inches the entire winter. It's been horrible. I mean, horrible for me because I would like more snow. Hi Diane, welcome. Hi Julie. Julie says predicted wind chills for Adirondacks in about 2 hours north of here at minus 40 to minus 50. We have minus numbers for later this afternoon and tonight. But guess what? By afternoon Saturday, it's going to be back to 24 degrees. So it's just a little dip, and then we're going to be back to, maybe I'll hike tomorrow afternoon after my Zoom class with Santa Rosa ASG. We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to be working with linen, and I got my I checked tracking number for it, and it's coming today, and I was all excited, and then I realized it was the regular USPS mail, so that will come with my regular mail at around 3, so I don't have it to share with you today, but I will be, sharing it with you next week. Next week, I am starting a Sorcha Classic Slim Trouser Sew-Along, so if anyone wants to sew along with me, I figured that would be fun. Plus, it also gives me the opportunity to carve out time to sew some pants for myself. And what I'm going to do with my pants is I'm going to treat the pattern a little bit differently for each type fabric. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me just see what Mary's saying. Mary says, I hope it goes back to the 20s. I feel like I need to pull the snow off the breezeway roof. Yeah, we'll just be careful doing that, Mary. Um, ugh. All right, so to start with the linen version of my Sorcha trousers, I'm going to show you how I adjusted my pattern, and then I'm going to show you a fabric I had in my stash that made a really good test fabric to just check to see if it was going to work for me. So what I'm finding is if you follow the guidelines on the pattern, let me just switch my view here for a minute. I'll show you this in a minute. Just show you some things here. All right, I'm going to switch my view. I think I have to, I'm going to blow out my, and darken it up so you can see what I'm doing here. I think that's better. I just want to see if, okay, that looks like that's pretty sharp. Okay, so what I want to show you here, what I'm doing is I'm working with, you know, when you test patterns, you end up with a bunch of versions before you finish fixing everything. So what I have in front of me here is the version right before I made my final, what's happening for me? Hey, Andrea, welcome. Oh, I guess I should also thank everybody who ordered the pattern right out of the gate. I had so many orders. I was so happy. Anna and I spent a couple hours doing shipping, and then we bebopped ourselves right to the post office and dropped them off into the mail on Thursday? What's today? Today's Friday. Wednesday. So they're all in the mail, shooting their way across country to you or down or wherever you live. So thank you so much for ordering them. Okay, so what I want to show you here, let's take a look at the top. Well, let's look at the front first. Okay, so you can see what I did here. I think you can see I chopped off all the fly pieces. I chopped off the cut-on fly because it gets in the way if you're trying to fit your pants. So for my first, you know, test, well, I'm only going to test once. So to test it though, I cut off the fly piece because it tends to get floppy at your center front and it makes it difficult to see what you're doing. Oh, hi, Andrea. Good morning. You can't wait for your pattern to get here. It is on its way. It's coming. All right. So I cut off the cut-on fly pieces so it would be nice and straight. And then I added 4 inches above the top of the waistline. And then I don't recommend doing this yourself. I mean, this is a do what I say, not what I do moment, because I'm working with these test patterns and I didn't want to waste more paper. So I worked with the graded nest. I'm the size 14. So what I did was I measured out from the 14 my 1.5 inch extra allowance on my side seam. And then I cut out one leg. And here's a good idea if you're working with just testing your leg, to make sure that the hem is not hitting your feet or your ankle. It needs to hover above your ankle so you can see if it's parallel to the floor when you're doing your fitting. I basically just folded up the hem and lined up the bottom edge with the knee line, and then I just folded in the little bit that came out or stuck out from the side, and that way I could not use the entire length and also, you know, make sure I have enough fabric to go below the knee, but not so long that it hits my ankle. Hi, Kathy. Welcome. You're fine. You're only a few minutes late. We're reviewing my size 14 Sorcha classic slim trouser pattern, and I'm going to show you how I'm adjusting it for a bottom weight linen fabric. I was hoping to have the linen here because it said it was coming today, but it's probably going to arrive as soon as I get off or a little bit after. So I'm just showing you how I'm adjusting my pattern. I'm working with one of my previous test patterns before I finalized it. So it has like little typos or my little notes and stuff on it. So I'm just working with the graded nest so I don't waste more paper tracing. So because I'm working with linen that I got at Gorgeous Fabric, it costs $24 a yard. I wanted to just double check and make sure it was going to work for my shape. And because it's linen, I wanted to fill out the leg a little bit. So this leg, hi Anne, welcome. This leg tapers to the knee and then goes straight down from there. So if you want a straight leg fitted slim silhouette, it's the perfect shape pattern for you. And you can certainly make linen pants with that style shape leg, but I wanted to add a little bit. So what I want to do here is show you what I did. So in the front, let me just use a Sharpie marker to mark my size so you can see it here. Oops, not that. Yeah, one of my Sharpie markers here. Hold on. Here, we'll use this mint green. So here is my side seam is right here. This green line is the original cutting line for the size 14. I'm just gonna quickly just mark that. Okay, so what I did on the side seam, I'm just going to zoom in so you can see the side seam. What I did here was I measured out 3/4. Well, let me see what I did here. It looks like it's an inch. I thought it was 3/4. Let me just measure that. Oh yeah, 3/4 of an inch. So I measured out 3/4 of an inch to here. Oops. Okay, so at the knee, I measured 3/4 of an inch out. 3/4, and then I went 3/4 down at the hem. So I went out 3/4 of there, and then you can see I blended from the knee back up to the original hem. So my new cutting line, or my new stitching line, let me do that in a different color. How about if we do this pink, is going to be like this. So I very gradually came down to the knee and then all the way to the hem. So I added 3/4 of an inch on the side seam to make the leg a little bit fuller, and then I added my 1.5 inches from there. And on the inseam, I measured out the same amount. Oh no, well yeah, I did. I measured 3/4 at the knee as well, and then you can see I blended it from the original to the knee and then straight down to the hem. Okay, there's no extra seam allowance on my inseam, but that's how I widen the leg. So you can see it's almost like I filled in, like all of this is now extra between these two lines. So I wanted to give myself a little bit more fullness to my leg for these linen pants. Okay, so that's what that looks like. That's the front. And then in the back, there's my back pattern. I basically did the same thing. So you can see here, this one's a little bit easier to see because I didn't screw it up. I screwed up my front and I had some extra lines. But you can see here, I measured out from here to here. I did 1 inch in the back, a little bit extra. And then I went straight down. And then I added 1 inch over here too. So I added a little bit of extra along the back leg and went straight down. And then I blended it back up. And you can see in the back, I did not add up here at the very top. I started adding here. So this is the amount I added to the inseam in the back. Okay, so I started adding about halfway between the knee and the crotch. Okay, so that's where I started adding, and then an equal amount all the way down to the hem. So that was one of the things I wanted to do, because linen, I like the way linen flows, and I like it to be loose and breezy. So I added a little bit, and then I cut them out. So let me show you. I'm going to put my pattern away for now. I cut them out and I sew them together. Now, what did I cut them out of? I'm using a linen fabric that's kind of expensive, and I don't want to screw it up because I think my total order was, with shipping, was like $60 something. And, you know, I wanted to get a nice linen. Like, I wanted to get something that was really a nice fabric. And I love Anne over at Gorgeous Fabric, so I thought that would be kind of cool. Oh, Cor is asking, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, I'm so sorry. She's asking why I added a little bit more. I added a little bit more in the back leg because I can. There's a bigger crotch extension, so I can add, the hip curve and the crotch extension are a little bit curvier. So I just added an extra quarter in the back. And you'll see I've already test fitted it, and I like the way it's hanging on my body. I'm going to show you. I took a picture, and the silly thing is the underwear I'm wearing is this exact color. I have one pair of this turquoise blue underwear, and I did not plan it, but what I want to show you here is this is a cotton gauze, and if I had left it just cotton gauze, I think it would have been a little bit too floaty. It's a little bit too light. It's more of a tissue weight linen feel as is. So I used the Material Magic, which is a spray stabilizer. I used Material Magic spray stabilizer to stiffen it so it has a nice body to it, which is similar to a bottom weight linen, because like I said, I really wanted to see how the leg was going to hang on me, and I wanted to see if the adjustments I made to the side and inseams would work before I cut out the linen. Okay, Mary's saying, don't you need to add to the back also so the side seam hangs correctly? Yes, Mary, I did. I added a 1/4 inch more than the front on the side and inseam. So I added 3/4 of an inch to the side and inseams in the front, and I added a full inch side and inseams in the back. And again, that was because, you can see, let me just bring this back for 1 second. You can see here, I don't have, if I pushed, I mean, I could have pushed this out a whole inch, but then my inseam would have been almost straight from my crotch point. It wouldn't have curved in a little bit. But in the back, you can see because of the, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. In the front, this is the front, you can see like I want it, the crotch tip is sticking out a little bit and with adding 3/4. In the back, over here, you can see how, I mean, I could have added 1.5 inches to the knee and the crotch point would have still been hanging up, pushed out farther. I didn't want it to be a straight line. So that's why I added a little bit more in the back than I did in the front. Okay. But I did add to both of them. All right, so the fabric I decided to work with here, again, is a cotton gauze, and I used, you could use spray starch, or I used Material Magic to, oh, I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm so excited. I want you to know, every time somebody joins me and they have a name that I don't recognize how to pronounce the spelling, I always go into a panic on the inside. So I'm so happy that I didn't screw that up. I'm not going to attempt your last name. So anyway, but you can see it's got a nice, you know, shifty sort of linen shifts around, right? And it's open weave. This untreated without starch would have probably been a little bit too floaty, but like I said, I used Material Magic, and then I ironed out all of the crinkle, because this was like a crinkle gauze, like the gauze has those crinkles in it, so I ironed it flat. So let me show you. on my phone. I'm going to zoom in here and show you how the leg hangs. And what I'm realizing here is once you start working with this pattern and using the top down center out framework for fitting it, I'm going to be able to go straight to linen now. I don't have to cut out a second leg and really test it, because leaving the extra, I'm going to cut out the linen with some extra on the top and some extra on the side seam. Not as much as I have here. You can see I didn't need all of it, but this leg hangs beautifully. This is the back view, and I cut out the background because I didn't want my butt to show on the video, so I apologize for that. And then after I took the picture, I realized the hem does not show, but it is hanging straight. So this is how I look in the gauze half muslin. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the actual muslin on my fit waistband, and I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do with that. So that's how that's looking. And based on how this fits me and how comfortable it was, I pinned it on, and then I was able to bend and move around without the pins popping. And I didn't even take the time to put the Velcro on the inside of this leg because it kind of stuck to the hook Velcro that was on my fit waistband. But basically that's how it fit after fussing with it for about 10 minutes of fitting and getting the center front and the center back at the right level. All right, so that's how it looks. And let me show you here. Here is my muslin, and the first and I think the most practical tip here is, when this is on your body, so let's look at this first. I sewed a sort of a X into my 3-inch piece of Velcro. That's my closure. So I know my center front, when I put the right and left waistband edges together, is going to be right in the middle of my closure. So see, I've got it here too. So when it's on me, I had to take out the first pin, and the fabric lined up, or my stitching line lines up with that X. So you can kind of see through the gauze that the middle of my closure was where I put my center front seam. Okay, and then this is how it looked on my body. Let me make it a little bit bigger now so you can see more of it. But notice, here's one of the things. I've been working with this method both in hands-on classes with my private pants fitting students on Zoom. And one of the things that can cause you more time is if let's say you have this on you, right? And then you want to take it off and fiddle with it. Don't take the fabric off the waistband. Okay, pin it on a little bit. Add to the Velcro. If you put the Velcro on, like I showed in the video where I showed how to make the waistband kit, maybe add a few more pins so it doesn't come off, and then take off your half muslin like it's a pair of pants. Take the waistband off, right, and slide it off your body like this, so when you put it on your work table, it's still attached to your waistband. And that way you're not losing your work. So if you've got the right vertical adjustment, then you can, oops, let me just make this a little bit darker here. So make sure you can see, that looks pretty sharp. Okay, so that's what I did to fit this on, and you can see I've got my center back. The seam or the stay stitching on the center back is lined right up with the center back of my waistband, which is in between the two pieces of Velcro. So the stitching line or the stay stitching lines up with that. And if I had Velcro here, so one place where you would put Velcro if you were putting Velcro on your pants would be in the seam allowance on the center back. That would stick to this side of your Velcro. And that way, that would sort of act like a sticky pin for you and hold that like that. Okay, so that's how you can work with keeping the center back in place as you're working with fitting it. And what I find interesting is I drew the original top edge of my pattern. Let's push these back a little bit here. Let me just lower this. I want to see if I can, oh, that's already tilted. All right, that's better. There we go. All right, so this, if I stretch this out now, okay, this is my center front, this is my center back, and this brown line that I drew with a Sharpie marker, that was the original top edge of the pattern. So if you look at the pattern again, it doesn't matter which one I look at, the top edge of the pattern here where I say add 4 inches above waistband, this line I transferred onto my muslin. That way I have a reference for where the original pattern ended and if I need to go into the extra length. So you can see that in the front, if we look at the front pretty much the stitching line is a little bit above the top of the Velcro, which means I'm only going to need to add a tiny bit of length in the front. But then as we move to the back, you can see what happens. The original line of the pattern is actually below or just at the base of the waistband, which means I needed an extra inch here. Because if we look at the waistband, this waistband, the Velcro on the bottom ½ inch of the waistband is the seam allowance for the waistband. So if the top edge of your pattern, it was lining up there, then you would need to just add an additional ½ inch for the seam allowance on the pants. But to make it really simple, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark, just going to use a different color. Let's see if I can use red here. I'm going to mark along the top of the Velcro, and I'm just going to feel for it. And this is one of the benefits of adding the Velcro to the waistband here. Just marking the top of the Velcro. And when I get to the side seam, notice on my side seam, I did not sew this all the way up when I was doing the fitting. I left it open from crotch level up because you can see here, I needed to give myself like an extra ½ inch in the back. See how those don't line up? I had to let out the back waistband, the back waist just a little bit. And then I can keep going here. So I'm just going to mark where this is. So here's the whole, that's where the top of the Velcro is underneath my pants. So what does that mean? That means if I were going to sew these pants onto the waistband, I would need another ½ inch for the seam allowance for the pants, because this represents the stitching line between the waistband and the pants. So now I know how I can adjust my pattern to then cut out my linen. And what I'm going to do here is I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark a ½ inch above that. And then we're going to compare it to the original. So I'm just going to draw myself a line that's a ½ inch above. Like this. I'm going to flip my seam allowance over and add a ½ inch over here. Okay, so this solid line is where I would cut off the extra, or the line above my short dashed line is where I would cut off the extra. But because I want to be 100% sure this is going to fit me, I'm not going to cut it all off at this point. I'm still going to leave myself a little extra when I cut out my actual linen pants, but you can clearly see I don't need the full 4 inches in the front. Now in the back, look how close I am to the end. So in the back, if I measure my final answer here, let me just measure this. So in the back, I needed to add 1. So there's 2 3/4 inches here. So I had to add 1 1/4 inches to the back rise to get these to fit the way I liked. So that's why, you know, adding to the top of the waist allows you to let the fitting decide for you what the final length of your front and back crotch is going to be. And that takes a lot of pressure off. You don't need to measure your crotch and worry about your front crotch versus your back crotch or your total crotch length. If you're adding to the top of the pattern like this, the fitting is going to do that for you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in my back piece first, and I am going to mark over here at the end. And if I just continue up my, just going to continue up my safety seam allowance here to the top. So it's to go for my size, it's right here, right? Okay, so that's the edge of the size 14 continuing on, right? So over on this end, I had it's 2 3/4 inches where I have to cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 2.5 inches down. I'm sorry, I'm going to measure 2.5 or 2 3/4 inches up like this. So I need to add that. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting myself confused. Hold on. Beep, beep, beep. No, it's from this way. I'm sorry. So I'm going to measure 2 3/4 inches from the top. This is the amount I don't need. This is my cutting line right here. Cut. Here, this is nothing. I'm sorry. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check it over here on my side seam. So at my side seam, right here, I have, if I measure from the top, I have, hold on, let me just measure it really neatly. I have the full 3.5 inches, like 3 3/4 inches. So I'm going to measure at this, oops. All right, can you see? I also made another boo-boo. Is anyone awake and paying attention? I measured my center back at the side. So my center back is over here. So this is where the 2 3/4 inches should be measured right here. On the side seam, it was 3.5. 1, 2, 3. Well, 3 and almost 3/4 actually. So let's just do this right here. So this is going to be my new cutting line for my pants right here. Okay, so you can see I didn't need to add the full 4 inches, but you never know. You know, I would still, if you're over a size 10, or if you're a 10 and over, I would give yourself 4 inches. Maybe if you're a 10 and a 12, you can do 3 inches. But if you're a 14, 16, 18, or plus that, give yourself 4 inches here, because there's been times where I've gotten really close to the center back, depending on the pants I was working on. So this is the cutting line. This is my cutting line for the fitting. Now, I don't want to cut there on my linen, because what if I want to still make a fine-tuning adjustment, right? So I am going to, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional inch at this point. I think that's maybe, let's add 1.5 inches. I'm going to add an additional 1.5 inches, okay? And then I'm going to cut the rest of this off. Now, before I cut it off, you can see I extended my darts up to the top. And when I sewed them, I didn't take the time to establish the actual edge. So as I sewed them, the middle got really funked up. So to prevent that from happening on my actual pants, what I want to do here is I want to fold my darts like this and press it over like this. Okay, so there's one. And I'm just going to take the pins off of here. I don't need the pins on my muslin anymore. So I'm just going to pin that right below my cutting line. And then I'm going to fold this dart like this. I'm going to fold this one this way. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it, and that's going to give us the shape we need for the darts. So I'm just going to pin that in like that. Okay, now when I cut it, look what happens. And I pressed one dart. One dart is going towards my side seam, and this dart is going towards my center back. You can do it however you want. I've heard darts being pressed in every direction possible, so I'm doing the one closest to the side seam, and the other one to the center back. Oops. Okay, so you can see what's going to happen now when I open this up. It's going to give me the shape that I need. So when I sew this now, see how that's really popped up there? See? So now I won't have that weirdness happening at the top of my leg. And then when I make my final cut, I will make sure that the darts are shut before I cut whatever the final answer is going to be. But that finishes my back leg. Now for my front leg, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to, actually, I can use the thing I cut off over here. This is what I cut off of my side seam. I'm going to use that as a pattern piece to mark my side seam, so I take off the same amount like this, so that then I know my side seams are going to match. So see how that's going to match. And then I'm going to look at my front, and I'm going to see what I did in the front. So at my center front, I almost didn't need anything here. When I measure this, it's going to be really close to 4 inches. Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3 3/4. So I needed an extra quarter at my center front. So I am going to measure, again, from the top, 3 3/4. 1, 2, 3 3/4. So I only needed this little bit here. Okay. And because this is a little bit of a drastic, this is kind of drastic, so I don't want to come in at a hot angle over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come down more gradually, and it's going to be more of a curve like this. Okay, so that's going to be my side seam edge. A little bit of a little bit of a curve to it. And then when I get over here, it's going to be straight. Because remember, this is all extra seam allowance. I'm not going to need that. And then the other thing I have to check is, remember in the back, I did an extra, I let out my back 1/4 of an inch. So at my side seam in the back, I only had from here to here, it was 1/4 inch less. So I think what I'm going to do now is reestablish the extra I'm leaving at my side seam to 1 inch total. So I had to let out my back 1/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this was my stitching line, or my stitching line was here, right? Because it's 1/2 inch from 14. That's where I would stitch. It's a 2-inch allowance, right? Or no, 1 inch and a, well, what did I do? Hold on. I did 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make my final answer now from the edge of my pattern. I'm going to make it, I'm going to cut it off at 1/2 inch extra. So basically, I'm just going to, well, I don't even have to mark it because all I have to do is cut off on the size 16, and that's going to give me an extra 1/2 inch because I know I don't need all that big seam allowance anymore. All right, Mary says, shouldn't you have measured that distance on the seam line on the side? Looks like a difference from the edge to the seam line. Shouldn't you have measured that distance on the side seam line on the side? Yes, I think I did screw that up a little, Mary, but let me look at what I pinned here. All right, so what I ended up with is the 2 inches in the front, and in the back, I only have 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make, so see, that's 1.5 inches. And on the front, it's 2 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself the 1/2 inch in the back, and then I'm going to add 1/2 inch. What I want to do at this point is make it so my side seams agree with 1 inch seam allowance instead of these bigger seam allowances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the back, I'm going to use the size 16 up at the top, and then I'm going to add 1/2 inch, and in the front I'm just going to cut it off on the size 16 line because I didn't need any extra. So in the front I used the original stitching line for the size 14. So if I give myself an extra 1/2 inch, that will be plenty to let out because the half muslin fit me nicely stitched on the size 14 stitching line, except up at the top in the back. And the reason why I think that happened is I didn't really adjust the dart intake so much. So another thing you could do if your back is tight and it looks like you don't need to draw as much room down the back leg, you can reduce your dart intake in the back. That's another way you can balance the length of the waist in the back. But I'm going to leave the dart intake because I like the way it was hanging, and I'm just going to add that 1/2 inch up at the top. And partially, this is why I don't like using a graded nest. So when I'm teaching a class and a student starts working right on a graded nest, it can get confusing because you have all of these lines, and then sometimes you kind of screw up what you're doing. So to keep myself from screwing up, especially, like I said, I'm working with a linen that was quite pricey. Up here at the top, I'm going to find a different colored Sharpie. I'm really hoping I can find like a black one. I'm going to use this fabric marker. So my stitching line up at the top was on my cutting line because I had to let it out a half an inch. So my stitching line in the back went like this. And then as it came down, it blended back to, you know, the stitching line over here. So like this. So my stitching line did this. So that means if I want to have an inch in the back, I'm going to add it like this. I'm only going to trim off a little bit in the back. But in the front, I'm just going to use the stitching line all the way. So see now, that's going to give me an accurate inch extra because up at the top I actually used the 16 stitching line at the very top, and then I blended back into the 14 down here. And so by the time I get back to the 14, then we'll just be an inch. And I'm just going to mark that now so I don't screw it up. So really what I'm doing is I'm adding a half, like an extra half an inch past. And you can see how confusing this is getting because I'm working on this graded nest. So this would be my public service announcement for not working on a graded nest. Hi, Eliza. We're working on a linen version of the Sorcha Classic Slim Trousers here. So I'm just going to cut this off now so I don't forget what I did. So I'm going to cut off this little bit. And then I'm just going to So when I sew my linen pants, I am going to sew my side seams at an inch. And then if I don't need that, I will trim it to a half an inch at the end. Hey Jerry, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So that's going to be my final back leg pattern piece. And then in the front, because I kept the original side seam the entire time, I am just going to cut off. I'm going to leave it at an inch for now. Okay, so it was 2 inches, so now I just have to cut off an inch up here. So I'm just going to mark it first. I'm going to use pink here. Okay, and also if you guys are wondering, okay, now I can go over here, now that I have the thing. So I'm just following along. Oops, 12. Giving myself an inch. Oh, and see, then it's just gonna blend with this. So I can cut off the extra. That's an inch. Oh, this has to fill in here. All right, so I'm just going to cut it off so I only have an inch left. Actually, it's right here. Yeah, that's right. It's here. Here. I'm getting confused by these lines. Okay, so let me cut that off before I lose what I'm doing. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hey, Sally. Let's see. You're saying, does the Sorcha PDF have layers so you can select the few sizes to display? I ordered the paper pattern and that's what I want, but I'm also thinking about the PDF. The PDF is not layered because there's only 4 sizes in a size grouping. So I felt like that was clear enough that I wouldn't do layers. And on top of it, you may want to choose different sizes based on your shape. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. So I just want to show you something here. I added, okay, so look at what happened here. I'm noticing now that I did something that really I took out. Let me show you what I did here. I'm noticing it now. And see, and this is, I'm getting confused by working on the graded nest. So this is probably the best advertising for not doing what I'm doing. Yes, and Sally, your paper copy is zooming its way right out because we shipped them all out. All right, so remember I added all of this extra? I added it, and then I added this much, 1.25 inches it worked. No, 1.5 inches. And then at 2 inches. Oh, no, it's right. It's right. See, I'm confused. I'm getting confused by these lines. So I added all of this purple, but then I sewed it 2 inches. So that is correct. I'm sorry. So don't listen to me. I'm rambling. I thought I then sewed all of this off, but I didn't. I mean, I thought I sewed it in and lost my flare, but I did not. So, sorry. Okay, so, because now I'm converting myself from I'm cutting off the extra seam allowance here. I'm making this an inch. All right. So let me just cut that off before I completely screw myself up here. See, the other thing I did, and this is another reason why do not use a graded nest. You can see here, see this red line outside of the purple line? First, I was measuring on the size 16 instead of the size 14. That's why it's really important to just trace your size first. I can't express that enough. If I'm having a hard time, then I imagine somebody else might have a hard time as well, keeping track of which line you're working with. So I have a whole bunch of extra lines on here because first I used the size 16 and then I went back down to the 14, which is the pink, when I was adding my extra seam allowance. So I'm just going to cut this so we don't need this. All right, so now I have 1 inch instead of 2 inches of an allowance. And I decided I'm going to add 1 inch. So on the top of the pattern, I'm adding, I don't know where my ruler went. I'm adding 1.5 inches across the top. So before I cut that, I'm going to add 1.5 inches here. And see what I'm doing, because it's the short, it's a curved edge. I'm using the short end of my ruler and I'm just measuring 1.5 inches all the way down, like this. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut that off. So now my pattern has extra, but a reduced amount of extra for when I work with my linen. And here's the important thing. If you're going to cut off your fly, your cut-on fly, make sure you put it back on before you cut out your pants, because obviously you need that. So I'm going to go to the pattern and I'm going to trace that back on. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is another reason why I left all the sizes on the PDF and I did not make it layered is because you might want to make some size choices based on your shape. So I'm going to let me roll out one of the other things here. I just want to show you this. So this is another size grouping, but just ignore the fact that, don't worry about the size grouping. That's really not the important part here. What I want to show you is, on the pattern, let me get the size chart. Here's what the finished instructions look like. And on the size chart, which is on the last page, okay, that's, no matter which size pattern you bought, you get I just put the same size chart on all of the pattern pieces, all the size groupings, just so I wouldn't go crazy trying to make, 3 different instructions. But what I want to show you here is I'm giving you information not only for the waist and full hip, I'm also giving you information for what the finished knee is and what the finished upper thigh is. And that's going to give you information on helping you pick sizes if you're in between sizes. Okay, Karen says, I ordered the PDF size 10 to 16, which I'm thinking I should have gotten the smaller based on what I'm watching. I have your Zoom on the 12th. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you right now, if anybody ordered a PDF and it's the wrong size, just let me know and I will send you the right size. I'll send you the other size. I don't want anyone to be worrying about, if they made a boo-boo, just let me know. I will send you the other one or the one you wanted or whatever it is. So don't worry about that, Karen. Just email me later and I'll send it to you. But what I want to show you here is, so let's say, okay, this is the size 2 to 8 grouping. The finished hip on the pattern for, oh, that's right. I knew what you meant, Karen. Karen's in my, the whole scoop, multi-method pants fitting class with Fabric Mark that starts on the 11th. Yes, so just email me and I will definitely do that. So the reason why I included the finished upper thigh measurement is you really need that measurement to decide, what you should do if you're between sizes. So for example, let's say you choose, let's go just with the size 6. Okay, you chose the size 6 because your full hip is 35. All right, so whatever it is, like I said, I'm just pulling out numbers. You want to pick a size that's 2 inches bigger than your full hip because that will give you 2 inches of ease on your hip area. Now, let's say you look over here now to your finished upper thigh and your upper thigh is only 19 inches. Let's say it's significantly smaller than what the corresponding upper thigh measurement is. What I would do in that case is I would go down one size when you're tracing the inseam in center front, center back. So if the full hip measurement, and let's go into the next size grouping. Let's say you fit into the size 14 because your full hip is 43 inches. But then you look over here and the finished upper thigh is 27.25 and your upper thigh is only, let's say it's only 23 and that's 4.5 inches of ease and you don't want that much ease, you can go down a size. So what I'm talking about here is, let me just make this a little bigger now. Okay, so I measured, Sally's asking me where I measured. I measured approximately 2 inches below the tip of the crotch to get that measurement. but I used my Vector Scribe plugin that gives me to the thousandth, and the measurements came out like I couldn't get an exact difference between each measurement, so I rounded to the closest measurement within like a 16th or an eighth. So somewhere right here within 2 inches, okay, is where I measured to get the numbers on the size chart. But notice, if you needed the size, let's say your full hip, you needed the size 6. So you're going to trace this size on your side seam, right? And you're going to go straight up here, okay, like the dash line shows, and then you're going to add to the top. Over here on your inseam, if your upper thigh is significantly smaller, you can then trace the 4. So you're just going to come down and do the 4. But if you do the 4 in the front, okay, you have to remember to also do the 4 in the back, because you want to make sure that your inseams stay the same length, right? So this is how you can choose between sizes if your upper thigh is smaller. Now this could also work in reverse. Let's say you needed the size, let's say you needed the size 6 over here, but then when you checked your thigh measured 26.5 inches, and that only gives you an inch of ease. You could then pop yourself out to the size 8. So you have choices that can help you get the pattern to get as close to your body shape as possible. And here's another thing you can do. If you're looking at your size and you have a full inner thigh, you can also give yourself an extra 1/2 inch allowance here. I didn't draw it on the pattern, but if you give yourself an extra 1/2 inch all the way down and then sew at 1 inch, that will give you room to let it out if you need to through your inseam. So if you have a prominent inner thigh and you feel like you might need more, for insurance, you can just extend that out an extra 1/2 inch all the way down, both front and back, and sew at, then sew at a 1 inch seam allowance on your inseams. Okay, so you can do that. And if you're working with the top down, center out framework of pants fitting, where you're going to start with a single leg muslin, using a bigger seam allowance on your inseam isn't going to get all messed up with the crotch, because you're not sewing the crotch curve. So take your time, fit the single leg. When you're happy with the way the single leg fits, trim any extra seam allowance off before you trace your second leg and put a full leg together to do any final fitting you want to do. So that's another nice thing about working with a single leg muslin. Adding extra to your inseam isn't gonna make it difficult to see what you're doing. Because if you're working with a full pair of pants and you have a full inch seam allowance on your inseam, and then you sew through your crotch, sometimes it gets all bunched up in there and it's hard to see what you're doing. But during the part where you're fitting just a single leg, you can have a bigger seam allowance. So those are some basic tips to get you started to pick your size. And I wanted to give some tips for working with different fabrics. So today, if you came late, I talked about working with linen and that, and how to pick a fabric that's similar to linen, so you don't cut into your, $20-something a yard fabric and then realize you have a fitting problem. So I used this very sheer, you can see me practically, cotton gauze that I sprayed with Material Magic or starch to create a similar drape to the linen I'm going to be using. And I will be posting, pictures of my linen when it gets here. I'm going to take some photos of it before I wash it, and then I'm going to pre-wash and dry it so it's all nice and pre-shrunk And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut out my legs, and I'm going to cut out both of my legs using my adjusted pattern that I did today. And then I'm going to fit the first leg, make any final adjustments to my pattern, and then I'm going to lay that pattern piece right on the second leg that I cut out and trim off any extra I don't need. And then I'm going to sew my whole pair, or, you know, just get the whole pair together. Once I'm happy the whole pair works, then I'm going to cut that front pocket opening in, because remember, we don't have a front pocket opening now because we're testing it. But once I'm happy with the final fit, I'm going to cut my seam allowance on the side to a 1/2 inch. I'm going to cut my waist allowance to a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to cut my front pocket opening. So that's going to be the process for that. And I will be working on these things. Some of these things I'm going to work on during the week, and then other things I will start working with next week. So if anybody wants to join me for the, the sew along, that starts next week. And I'll be working with probably my linen. Well, depending, I might try to sew my linen pants and have a second pair cut out for next Friday, because I really want to make a bunch of these pants to wear and photograph, and because I've already worn to death the first pair that I made. So, and here's another thing. If you're going to be spending the time to make your pants, make sure you're picking quality fabric. The first pair that I made, and I think I have them. Hold on. I leave them up here. I might have brought them. Oh, wait a minute. I just want to show you. Oops. Okay, so this first pair that I made, oops, sorry. I just want to show you here. This fabric is can I swear, like a crappy fabric. I just want to show you here. Oops, come back over here. Look at my crotch. So this is going to be proof to you. You know, I've been saying to you guys, I've been washing and wearing these pants. And what I want to show you here is I'm going to zoom in and see the pilling going on. See how pilled that is? That's my, my inner thigh right here and here. And it's all pilled. I don't know if you can see that. I think you can see it. That's the sun getting in the way. But this fabric was yucky. So basically, I've essentially worn my first pair to death, literally. See the pilling? So when I say that I wash and wear these pants on repeat, I'm being 100% serious. I love them. So that's why I really would like to make some quality pants out of some quality fabric. I had this in my stash. Here's another thing. Don't be tempted to fit yourself in a non-stretch fabric and then pick a stretch fabric to sew your pants. I'm going to just show you here. Here's the hem. Watch how much stretch this fabric has. See, it does. It probably has, I'll tell you how much it has. In a 10-inch piece, I can stretch it 1 inch. So it's got 10% stretch. Okay. I cut my pants out. I didn't do any fitting. I just cut them out. And then after I wore them, I had to take the waistband off and take them in an inch, almost an inch and a half on each side. And look at how short my pocket opening is now. I lost my pocket opening because I had to take the side seam in after I constructed everything. So do not be tempted to use a stretch woven, even if it just has a little bit of stretch. Because if you have a 40-inch hip, that means it's going to stretch 4 inches if it's 10%, right? So do not be tempted to do that, because then you'll have to take in your side seams and you'll lose your front pocket opening. This front pocket opening is now only 4 inches. I can still get my hand in there, but it's really not ideal. So that's another thing, you know, and I know that, and I did it, and look what happened. So make sure you use non-stretch fabric. If you want to use like a twill that has a little bit of stretch, fit the pattern for that. You know, you can still work with a little bit of stretch. You might have to go down a size, you might have to take it in, you might have to shorten your rise, but I mean, you can try it, but don't fit a non-stretch fabric and then sew it out of stretch like I did, because that was a little bit of a disaster. So I just want to also mention that if anybody is watching and they don't have a copy of the Sorcha Classic Slim Trousers, they're on sale until the sew along starts next week. They're 20% off, and I put the coupon code Sorcha20 in the description below, along with the links for the pattern. So I have that ready for you if you want to do that, if you don't have your pattern. And yeah, so I am going to enjoy the rest of today and tomorrow inside, because we're in this Arctic blast of freezing cold, super windy weather. And then maybe I'll sneak out for a hike tomorrow afternoon, because by Saturday afternoon it's going to be back to 24 degrees, which is balmy for me when I'm hiking. But in any case, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions about sewing or picking out a size or fitting or any of these things, please post those below and I will help you. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Next Fit Tip Tuesday this week, I am going to be sharing a new notion. This is one of the things they sent me. It isn't the notion, but this is a magnetic pin holder. And it was one of the things they sent me, but I will be reviewing a new notion on Fit Tip Tuesday next week, and they're really, really fun. I'm so excited about it. I actually unboxed them. I was so excited when I opened the packaging that I've already taken them out and looked at them. So new notion review Fit Tip Tuesday this week coming up. And I will see you on Friday next week for part 1 of the Sorcha Classic Slim Trouser sew along. So have a nice weekend, everybody, and I will see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining me.